Let's make this episode a special one by just being ourselves and loving ourselves just the way we are. Uh, Charlie Kirk sits with Bill Maher.
This is where the conversation about religion started. As you know, I'm a devout Christian. Watching this back, there are a lot of points I wish I would have made. However, I look at the clip, I look at the tape, and we had a friendly conversation, and I didn't want to be overly disagreeable. With that being said, there are definitely some things that I should have inserted.
Right. And we don't see eye to eye on the religion thing.
But
someone told me that. I got to tell you, you should see my movie Religion.
I actually saw it.
Oh, really?
And to your credit,
Thank you.
what you did on Islam was awesome.
Let's stop there. What he did on Islam was what did you think about what he did on Christianity?
The other one's not so much. That's
Correct.
Funny. That's
Secondly,
good.
so if you just isolate the Islamic part.
But it was funny. Come on.
Secondly,
Jesus.
to your credit, you treated woke like a religion,
Yes.
and you criticized them with the same
Yeah.
intensity and
Yeah,
ferocity
yeah.
you did, and you deserve a lot of credit for
Oh,
that.
thank you.
No, I mean
appreciate
that because you looked at it as this has a
Right.
catechism, it has religious type
Totally.
undercurrents, it has almost a metaphysical presence to itself, and so you're an equal opportunity
Well,
critic.
I mean, yeah. And it's funny because the director of Religulous, Larry Charles, and I had dinner about a year ago, and I suggested, and of course it went nowhere because we're both too old to really act on it. But I said, people keep asking me, and I'm sure him also, to do Religulous too. But when they say it, they think we're going to, now we're going to go to India and make fun of the Hindus. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Okay, I'm not going to India, and the Hindus aren't that funny. Okay, we did it. The movie did great, and we love that it stands the test of time, and people always keep coming up to me and seeing it. Movies are amazing that way. But I said, somebody gave me a great idea. Why don't we do Religulous too? But the religion is wokeness.
Oh.
And then that's what I was suggested. And I said, yeah, but then you're going to have to do the right side of it too, because that's also a religion. Christian nationalism. I mean, come on, your boys, some of the people I think you're fond of, they mix religion and politics in a way that I think is not according to the Constitution. But I have to tell you, I'll give you a lot of credit. I saw a video of yours where you were talking about how Christy the original documents were, which is, I mean, my view is that the founding fathers, we know a number of them were deists. Mostly that was their religion. But you did, and you have your facts down. I mean, you can spiel when you get on a subject like this.
I got the shtick down.
You really do. And I trust you, I'm going by but that they were a little Christier than I thought, and I'm always happy to learn new information. And if it doesn't satisfy people that I don't stay exactly where I am, it satisfies the people who are actually my fans, who always want me to do that, to be like, oh, if I take in new information. I mean, that's why, the far left hates me because I went to the White House and said, well, privately, Trump's different.
And good for you for saying that.
And I didn't give an inch on anything I believe. I confronted him on things that I think, he probably maybe never hears from anybody else. But that's not good enough for them because, they had to. But no, if you take in new information, just tell me. And so I do think after listening to your spiel that, yes, they were a little more into Jesus than I thought. I mean, I know Jefferson wrote that Bible and
He heavily edited it.
took all the miracles out. He took all the religiosity out of it and just made him
A moral teacher.
a moral philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to admit, that's not exactly the act of a Christy person.
No, but at least he acknowledged that there was something profound there. Got to give him credit for that.
I could even acknowledge that.
Okay, that's good. No, I'm glad to hear you say that.
Jesus as a philosopher was a true revolutionary. I mean, when he said the meek shall inherit the earth, I think the response was...
Blessed are the peacemakers. Right.
Yeah, but the idea that it gets good in the next life was fairly, I think, revolutionary. And the fact that, if you're a good person in this life, there's a much greater... This is just the pregame. You want the after party.
Don't
And
you
the
think
after party is just going to be awesome. You're up there with me and my dad, God, and it's just, you know.
With him and his peppy.
What do you think would create a better society or better action? People that think that there is an afterlife based on how you act, or people that think there isn't one?
That's a great question, because it certainly can turn people either way. It can make you fly planes into a building. I'm not speaking of any specific example.
I can't think of anything.
I can't either. But it can make you do that. You'll admit that.
Sure.
Okay.
It could also make you do
Cool.
like blow up Oklahoma City too.
Yes. And it can also,
I fully acknowledge.
And I fully acknowledge that it also keeps millions of people in line. Like Mark Wahlberg. I'm guessing without Catholicism, he just looks like a guy who'd be in a lot more trouble. But I think it just has made his life, you know, much more under control. So there's one. Mark Wahlberg, I think, really benefits from Catholicism. But I think there's lots of people like that. They truly are worried that if they do something out of line, illegal or immoral, that the devil will, in short order after they die, be poking them in the ass with a pitchfork, and so they don't do that. And I got to give it up. That is a positive. But then the planes in the building.
Great tactics.
Thing.
No, and that is on the extremes of, of course Islam has to defend itself. I won't defend Islam. But are you at all worried that when a nation becomes too secular,
Be fair all around the board.
it might not know what it believes? There's no cultural cohesion. There's no glue that keeps it together.
Yeah, but this isn't that nation. This isn't secular. This is a bunch of religious
It's
freaks.
increasingly secular, though.
Well, thank you. I'm trying.
No, but
I appreciate it.
You are quite the evangelist for your cause of no afterlife
but,
and no creator.
You know what? It creeps up a little, but people always are going to want it. People always are going to want to believe a story. It's much better than the truth, which is that things are random. We don't know the big questions. We don't know how we got here. We don't know why we're here. We don't know how the universe started. We're alone in the universe. You know, is there a God? What is the nature of God? Which one is the right God? We just don't. Nobody knows. I mean, that's why they call it faith.
Do you hope you're wrong?
They call it faith and a belief, because it's a doubt about that. What a belief is a doubt, because I don't believe I have a red hat on. I know I have a red hat on. I believe it may be UFOs or aliens, but I can't say that for certain. I don't know that.
That's the most important question.
That's a great question. Well, how
do you hope there's a heaven?
No.
I hope they figure out how I can live forever. I like it here with you, Charlie, drinking this and smoking pot.
Fiji,
I'm having a great time. I really can't imagine it better. I mean, I can't. And maybe it is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure, people have...
But something in you probably hopes that, I don't know,
yes,
Hitler gets ultimate judgment, or the most evil things, right? Something in you wants to see your love.
See, why would he say he wants Hitler to get ultimate judgment? Because if you believe in a God or you believe in a Jesus, then God and Jesus allowed Hitler to do what he was going to do. Because remember, God is omnipresent, omniscient, and something else. So he knew all of these. Allegedly, he knew all of these things were going to happen because he's the master of the universe, and he already knows these things. So he allowed those things to happen. If you believe in a God, then God allowed those things to happen. If that's what you believe, he already knew it.
Loved ones, and
I don't think about Hitler.
No, but there's got to be a desire somewhere.
A lot of people just think about Hitler.
Stalin, Mao.
I know, but I'm just saying Hitler comes up a lot. He really...
Fair enough. Let's that there's a desire that there's something beyond this.
Well,
that is just.
Okay. Yes, I do. But I mean, it's very hard to find that justice on earth. Ask an AIDS baby.
No, don't, Bill. That's why when you say, "Hey, I'm happy here," there's a lot of suffering on earth too, and that's
It is,
that's the Christian argument,
and
right?
some of it is you know, we obviously can see it comes from no bad deed done. You know, children with cancer.
Of course,
And then they say, well, that's, you know, God works in mysterious ways, which is sort of a get out of jail card
It's the
for
hardest,
any kind of non-thinking.
admittedly, it's the hardest. We as Christians have to explain unjust suffering. Atheists have to explain everything else.
How do you explain it?
We don't. It's hard. It's a mystery. We can say God works in mysterious ways. We can say original sin. However, we don't have to explain creation or the miracle of life or love or justice or.
We don't have to explain it either because it's not explainable because we don't know. We say we don't know. That's honest. You say, no, somebody told a story a long time ago and we're going to stick with that. That to me, I'm not trying to be insulting.
You can't offend me, trust me.
Great.
I mean that. So
All
you
right.
could be as crude or as blunt.
Okay,
I mean that. It's not.
But I find that intellectually embarrassing.
That's fine.
Correct.
As my friend Frank Turek would say, it's impossible to know because of the ripple effect, which is this. We believe in Romans 8:28, God will work all things for good for those who love him. But this is the idea, that every event in this world ripples forward to trillions of other events. Unless you are the all-knowing being and have eternal perspective, how do you know that these tragedies that are objectively evil will not work together for good in the end? Perhaps there are many good things that will come out of tragedies in individual lives that we'll never hear about. In fact, good results may even come from generations from now, unbeknownst to those who will never experience them. Maybe a baby getting cancer today, which is awful and just unspeakable, sends forth a trillion ripples.
Let me ask you guys a question. If you had all the power in the universe and you had the opportunity to, let me get to it. If you had the power, would you allow a baby to have cancer? If your answer is no, then you are better than any God that you know of. Simple and plain. Because your ex would be better than that one.
That is partially responsible for bringing forth a great evangelist 500 years from now who saves millions of people. Only God can track all those ripples, and only God can weave all those things for good. Keep watching.
And so, is there any part of the Bible you think is true?
Well,
no, it's
true.
an important question.
Well, I don't know what he's going to say, but are any parts of the Bible true? The Bible has some good things in it. The Bible has some bad things in it. It's a book.
Meaning, like when they were documenting King David, like was King David a real figure?
There are shards of it that are, I'm sure.
So Jesus was a real person.
No.
Well, that we don't know. That is not a definitive.
Okay,
it really is not. And I'll tell you why. And I'm sure you know this. The Gospels are written from
70 AD to 120 AD.
Correct.
Yes.
So they're
about 30 to 40 years after Jesus' life.
No, they're from 40 to 70 years after Jesus' life.
Yeah,
the earliest one is Mark,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the one with 70 AD. It's the destruction of the temple. That's why it's the bleakest one. It's the one that ends with, Father, why have thou forsaken me? Okay, so we see that history does involve itself in what's going on. You kind of have to read between the lines. But here's the question I've asked before here. How come the Gospels, we know everything in the New Testament is either the Gospels or St. Paul.
Or the book of Acts, which is written by Luke. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
The book of Acts is the best evidence that Jesus is real. But
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
But Paul lives in the 50s. He's much closer to Jesus' time.
Correct. Yes.
And he knows much less about Jesus. He really doesn't even imagine him as a figure that lived on earth. He's more like a God from heaven.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, that's in St. Paul.
No, he talks about the literal ministry of Christ.
He certainly doesn't. Okay, you'd have to show me that because my recollection, and this is from a course in college, is that he was not, that we know very little from St. Paul about Jesus, and he understands Jesus very, whereas the Gospels written later, they have a lot of information about this guy. And of course, they also penciled in the crucifixion like 300 years later. I mean, the Bible was edited. And the Bible itself is an anthology of books. They didn't, there's the Dead Sea Scrolls. There were books that didn't make it into the final cut.
Like
There's
Book of Enoch, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas. No, I fully acknowledge
the director's cut, right?
So, well, there is a lot of contradictory stuff. For example, in the Gospel of Thomas, why it wasn't included, that Jesus is in the water, Jesus is in the leaves. But there's other extra biblical accounts, though, that show that Jesus was a real figure outside of the Bible.
He could have
He's
been.
mentioned in the Talmud, for example. He's mentioned in Roman historical documents like Herodotus and many others.
Excuse me, Herodotus was Greek. Herodotus was 500 years earlier.
Not Herodotus, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different.
Suetonius?
It's a different Roman.
He's Roman.
It's a different Roman historian.
But Herodotus was the lying father.
Nah,
100 or 200 years later, not Herodotus.
Okay.
Point being is that there were other historical extra biblical accounts.
So this portion, it gets very technical, and this is all about the dates of the Gospels. Again, I got to give credit to my friend Frank Turek. In his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which I'm going to send a signed copy to Bill Maher, which I think would be great. All the Gospels, we know, were written prior to 70 AD. They don't mention the Jewish war or the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. This would be like writing a history of the Twin Towers and not mentioning they were destroyed on 9/11. And the gospel writers write as if the temple and areas of Jerusalem are still standing while they are writing. For example, in John 5:2, it says that there is a pool called Bethesda, which wouldn't have been the case after 70 AD. Dr. Jonathan Bernier authored the most recent complete book on New Testament dating. He concludes that every gospel is prior to 70 AD, with Mark being the earliest at 42 to 45 AD. And every other New Testament book as also prior to 70 AD, with only a few shorter books having an estimated range that passed beyond 70 AD. Matthew, who wrote the Gospel, was an apostle. He wrote prior to 70 AD, and I thought that was the case when I was sitting down with Bill, but actually I was like, I think he was an apostle, and I didn't say anything, but it turns out he was an apostle. So on this idea of Paul not quoting Jesus, first let's hear what Bill has to say, and then I'm going to respond to it. Let's listen.
Okay.
Let's contend
it doesn't
that,
even matter to
let's
me.
contend Jesus was real.
Let's contend.
But then, so the resurrection is the...
So let's contend Jesus is real. Let's start right there. How does one die and come back? If Jesus is real, how does he turn these loaves of bread and 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish? I forgot. How does one, if he's a real person, how does he turn this to feed over 5,000 people, men and women and children? If Jesus is real, how does he die and come back to life? Talk to his homeboys, his 12 homeboys, and then leave the planet. If Jesus is real, how did he defy the laws of gravity and nature and walk on water? Something that no one else has ever been able to do. How does he do these miracles if this is a real person living on the earth? No one has ever done these miracles. So let's start there.
Pinnacle of the Christian faith.
Of course.
Cool.
Yes. We're coming up on Easter Sunday.
Because if it's probably rational that if Jesus was real, because we know that at least his apostles were real, right? And they likely wouldn't have died the death they had if it wasn't for Jesus's.
How do we?
That's the homeboys that he talked to. The 12 disciples that he talked to before he flew away from the planet into the galaxies.
You know the apostles were real?
Well, not just because of their own first-person testimony, but other extra biblical accounts.
We know that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John of the Gospels are not the same people who were his apostles, right?
Well, Matthew was a tax collector, right?
Matthew, who wrote in 70 AD, was not
the Matthew that's the disciple.
Thank you.
But Luke was a hired physician.
Luke was a physician.
Who was
yes.
hired to write to Theophilus. Basically, a rich guy was like, hey, go find out about this Jesus guy.
A physician.
Right?
Okay.
And basically,
Why does Jesus, why are you running around with a physician? Like, you the greatest doctor ever. You the greatest physician ever. What the fuck?
Theophilus, lover of God, which is, in my opinion, the most compelling of the two documents. But we do know objectively that, like, Peter was a real person, right?
We do?
Oh, yeah, without it.
You're right. We do know objectively. You don't know that. You believe that.
Doubt.
Peter, the guy who upon my rock you shall build my church?
Yeah, St. Peter's Basilica. I mean, like,
Okay.
we know Paul was real, for sure, right?
Paul, yes.
Yeah, and Paul talks about Peter.
No.
Paul talks about Timothy, right? He writes to Timothy.
No.
So they have dialogues back and forth about Jesus.
No.
So Bill is like 5% right. Paul doesn't quote Jesus very much because he was converted after Jesus ascended to heaven. But here's the truth. The Gospels recorded what Jesus said.
See, you can't just say after Jesus ascended to heaven. Like, come on, man. You saying this is a real person, and then he ascended to heaven. Flew away from the planet like some superhero. Let's grow up, people.
So it wasn't necessary. In fact, the restraint of all the epistle writers in not making up quotes from Jesus, which would have been tempting to do in order to resolve disputes among, like, circumcision, which Bill makes fun of, tongues, or women in the church, shows that they were being true to Jesus. They weren't inventing things, he said, although it would have been convenient to do so. This is the critical point, everybody. The dating of all the documents are not as important as the dating.
Circumcision, which is you're gonna tear up the foreskin, basically mutilating people because of disbelief. Nothing else on this planet is being, no other animal is being mutilated. No. Deer don't need it. Dogs don't need it. Whales don't need it. Monkeys don't need it. Gorillas don't need it. So why does disbelief just only with the humans?
Of the sources. For example, if you write a book about the events of 9/11, right now, 23 years later, the fact that you are interviewing eyewitnesses from that time is more important than when you're writing it down. The same is true of New Testament events. In the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians, Paul writes down the testimony he received from others and the testimony that was authenticated when Christ appeared to him. So where did Paul get what he received? He probably received it from Peter and James when he visited them in Jerusalem 3 years later after his conversion, as we know in Galatians 1:18. Why is this important?
Probably.
Because as the legendary Dr. Gary Habermas points out, even liberal scholars believe that this testimony was part of an early creed that is within 1 to 3 years after the resurrection. Since these creeds predate the writings, when you're reading the New Testament documents, you're reading testimony far closer to the events than the dates of the documents themselves. The creed from, for example, 1 Corinthians 15 goes right back to the time and place of the resurrection. Therefore, it's unlikely to be describing a legend. Moreover,
The resurrection, the place where someone dies. Oh, no, where he came back to life. Resurrection, came back to life, died. I forgot. Resurrection, came back to life.
notice that Paul cites 14 eyewitnesses whose names are known, the 12 apostles, James, and Paul himself, and then references an appearance to more than 500 others at one time. Included in those groups was one skeptic, James, and one outright enemy, Paul himself. By naming so many people who could verify what Paul was saying, Paul was in effect challenging his Corinthian readers to check him out. Let's listen to more of my conversation with Bill Maher.
I guess let's just pretend Jesus is real. Again.
Yes. Okay.
Why-
he
That's what
could
we
be.
gotta do.
Why fake the resurrection then? Why? No, that's a good question. What?
Well,
If you are the
okay.
follower, no, let's think about this, because it is probably the most important event in human
You
history.
didn't have to fake it. I mean, you do realize that there were religions going around the Mediterranean for 1,000 years where the
Get them.
gods had the same biography or significant parts of the biography of Jesus. It's in Religulous. We put it in gods who were born on December 25th, and I could go into the reason for that, gods who had disciples, gods who were crucified on some sort of tree,
That had virgin births.
had virgin
Because
births.
they were hearkening back to Old Testament
Okay,
prophecy,
but no,
for
these
sure.
were all sorts of
Before.
religions around the Mediterranean, not just the Judeo-Christian. These are the Persian religions. This was Indian, and that's a very common part of it, is died and came back to life. It's obviously something primitive man would have thought about all over the world. The fact that they put this into this new religion, which something that the people of the time would have been familiar with, these concepts. Again, that's why they made his birthday December 25th, because that was already a huge pagan
No,
holiday.
for sure. And the Christian argument is we redeemed that to become Christmas. But let's just take the resurrection, though. Why would the apostles willingly go and spread what then became their death certificate? Why would they go and do that if it didn't actually happen? Like, take Paul. We both agree Paul was legit and
Because it's a story. It's a fairy tale.
a real person. Paul was a Jew, persecuted Jews, and then had his, road to Damascus moment. Why would he do that? Except for the fact that he's crazy or like delusional. What incentive would Paul have to do that? Rich, ruling class, gave up everything.
You're saying to me, is there never a case of human delusion or mass delusion or people
Why there's suicide cults, of course. I acknowledge that.
I'm going to answer your question. Do you remember the Hale Comet cult, Heaven's Gate cult?
No, I mean, I know Jonestown cult. I mean,
that's different. This was like 1997, and they believed there was this bunch of people in San Diego, and they believed that when the Hale-Bopp comet passed at a certain place, that the spaceship was going to pick them up, but their souls, they had to be dead. And they committed mass suicide neatly. They were living normal lives, going to jobs, saying, I'm sorry, you're going to have to change gates for your flight. And then they went home and put on
sneakers, right?
Purple shrouds and Nikes.
That I do know of, yes.
And mass suicide killed themselves. And you're asking me about, could humans believe something that wasn't true? Yes, they could. It doesn't take a hell of a lot. People want to believe, and it's a very enticing thought that this life, which possibly isn't that great, if I just give up this one, which is not that much, I can get this awesome one in the capacity, the human capacity to believe what's not true, to believe what you want to believe, is infinite. I mean, you are literally the person I'm talking about at the very beginning of the movie Religulous, because the very first scene, I'm sitting in the car and I'm saying, the movie is not a spiritual quest. I mean, that's what we told them, so they'd sign the release. The movie is me saying, I don't know how it could be that so many intelligent people can wall off a part of their mind and believe in something that part of their mind must know is not true. That's the question I'm going for.
Here's what was missing and should be added. The Hale-Bopp people weren't dying for an empirical claim that a man rose from the dead. Unlike the disciples, the Hale-Bopp people were dying for a claim they couldn't verify or falsify. Some people will die for a lie they think is the truth, but no one will die for a lie they know is a lie. Big difference. The apostles were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not. They went to their deaths anyway. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. Paul was crucified.
How does someone say that so confidently? Like, Jesus rose from the dead. Like, come on, man.
Hunted down Thomas. They hunted down James. They all died brutal deaths, for something they saw and they knew that was true.
And like, you're obviously a super smart
Well,
guy.
and respectfully,
And,
go ahead, sure. No.
and I don't want to insult you on that. And I appreciate you saying
No, I
it.
mean, Bill, have you seen me go to college campuses? There's nothing that
right,
can
but you understand my question, right?
Interestingly, ironically, I have the same struggle. I don't know how somebody as intelligent as you, and I'm not trying to offend you.
Cannot believe in a virgin
hold
birth?
on, time out, hold on. All of that takes
Right.
faith, I acknowledge, but that all of the fine-tuning of our universe, if any of those fine-tunings were off, a famous scientist...
Some of them are off.
He just said that believing in the virgin birth takes faith.
A famous scientist said, to believe that the universe and the earth in its current composition was an act of randomness would believe that a hurricane would go through a junkyard and assemble a 737 flight-ready Boeing.
He's wrong.
Okay, that's fine, but there are so many fine-tuning aspects to our existence that I think defy the idea that this is all randomness and all chance. Now,
You know that's not logical. You're
well-
saying because I don't know the answer, I'm going to assume the answer must be that a divine intervention did it. That's not really
Well,
a scientific way
there-
of
God of the gaps.
looking at it.
the teleological view, not the cosmological view, is that all of these fine-tunings, when layered up one after the other, it defies, I think, reason to think that this is just a roll of the dice. That when you see a baby come into the world, when you see how we naturally heal, even consciousness itself, I think, is a pretty miraculous thing. To think that's all just a bunch of
But if
happy accidents,
I
I think it's more rational to think that that's
Well,
a
you're-
byproduct of design.
You're saying some prime mover made it so these
Correct.
things happen. I would say, if a prime mover could do that, why don't skip all the suffering and why don't you just get us to where we're the perfect thing? Why you need things, I don't know, but okay, the perfect being right away. We're somehow on this journey to being, completely immortal and healthy, I guess, and completely moral and don't fuck each other up and don't.
Yeah, fuck all that. Let's get straight to it, man. You know what I'm saying? We ain't gotta get to do all this, live the life down here. Let's get straight to it. You the creator. Let's by the way, I got a prayer on the next video, on the last video, I got a prayer. We're gonna see if that come true.
Have sex with children and all the bad things
All
we
the
do.
evil of our world. Right.
All the evil and the Holocaust. And why go through all that if you are a prime mover? I assume that means you can do anything and just
Right.
get us right to the end. And then we can just, what? Why? Just a bunch of us walking around being perfect? I mean, why is that interesting to a God? The whole thing just don't make sense.
So that's a separate
Even so, I
question,
get
though,
it.
of whether or not there is something behind our existence. I mean, so we believe that the universe started with a Big Bang. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but that's not the beginning of things. That's just the beginning of what the known universe is. The big question is what was before that.
And we believe it's a
Right.
being, a God. That's
Right.
that's always, that's
And
a
it could,
constant.
and look, I mean, the misnomer about atheism is that we say, oh, there's no God. No, we just say we don't know. As Richard Dawkins always says,
Not this one. Ain't no motherfucking God. Like, that shit is some bullshit. Like, if it's one, if it's one, you got to acknowledge all of them. You got to acknowledge every God and every creation of the universe. So the universe was created by this one, all of the ones that created the universe in each time period. So 0 gods.
there's theism, which is belief in gods.
Unless 0 gods, unless all of them are true. So if one is true, let's say we got to say all of them are true. Not just because you have your belief in your, because you were born in the USA. No, the Indian God, the whoever. I ain't finna go through all that, but everybody's God is true, and they created the universe. And if they don't call them gods, they're creators or whatever. They're all true. Even the ones that were here, like the people in the Tasmania, for example, their God was true until the Europeans came, and then they said, "Hey, your God is. We're gonna teach you our God. Fuck your God, and come on with our God. And if you don't believe our God, we're gonna kill you, and we're gonna wipe you out the face of the earth until you believe in our God." So eventually, guess what? Jesus is king.
And they used to believe in many, and then it got to one, and we just believe in one less. So there's just not
How would you differentiate that from agnosticism?
There isn't.
Okay.
That's another thing that's bullshit.
No, I don't. I'm just asking
I'm
a
just
good
saying,
faith
yeah.
question.
No, I think a lot of atheists think that. A lot of people on my team with this, they have that view that, don't split hairs with the atheists and the agnostics. It's like, we're on some part of, I don't know, and I'll never know, so I really don't think about it a lot. I don't get up for church. I try to be a good person because I just think intrinsically it's good for society. It's good for me to be a good person as much as I can. And I don't need the threat of the pitchfork in the ass to do it.
Can I ask a question? So how
Ow!
But you even acknowledge, though, that some people act better if they feel as if they'll be judged eternally.
Totally.
Okay,
That's
no,
true.
that's a big admission. But
That's
Oh,
true.
yes.
how do you think society best determines what is good?
That's a great question. I mean, isn't that what government is always wrestling with?
What your meeting, I thought, was a great window into the whole liberal world that shows the Donald Trump that I know and that I've gotten to know, which is, and I just thought it was hilarious when he was, asking you about Iran, right? He'll ask anybody about anything. He loves asking people's opinion. He
Right.
listens more than he talks.
Right.
He'll
No,
solicit opinions. I know it blows people's minds when we say this.
Well, it also blows our minds because then he doesn't do the right thing.
Sometimes he does.
Sometimes he does.
The embassy to
And
Jerusalem.
I gave that whole list.
So
I also gave the list
Yes,
of
you did.
things that are horrible: disappearing people and ignoring judges and gutting the government with glee. This tariff thing that even the conservative press has turned off on. So, yeah, it was just honest down the line on both sides.
Do you feel?
I told you what I saw,
and good for you.
and didn't. And I just told this to Harvey Levin on his show. I'm proud. I looked him in the eye and said, "You're scaring people." I'm proud. I looked him in the eye and said,
How did he react to that?
I said
No, I mean,
that.
I'm not.
I know, but see, that's the thing. I said that the night I gave it. I said, "You're scaring people. Why do you want to scare your own citizens so much?" And I know everybody wants to know what he said. And the truth is, I don't remember. But it wasn't.
What kind of drugs were you guys doing that night?
But it wasn't okay. I'll stop.
Okay, then you would have remembered.
That I would have remembered. So I have no illusions that my dinner with Donald Trump is going to change the nation. But to the haters, it's just like, as opposed to what? Not engaging at all.
That is their.
It's either me or Gretchen Whitmer with the binders
Where
in
she's
front of
hiding.
her face. I mean, I feel like I did it better. I went in there. I didn't give 1 inch on what I believe, or saying to his face what I believe. But I told the truth about how he's different in private.
Do you think what do you think about the idea? You going, here's how I would frame it. You going to meet with Trump would be the equivalent of Biden inviting me over for dinner. Meaning,
Yeah.
is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Absolutely.
Why do you think Biden or Obama wouldn't do that and Trump did?
I mentioned that too in the thing. I said, you know what?
You did, but
I said, because look, this was kind of a guy's dinner. And Donald
Okay.
Trump is a man of a certain age, of a certain way of life. I just think.
That's it for that. That's all I'm doing right there. I just want to do the religious portion of this. Even if they got some more on there, I'm tired of this shit. And I ain't no motherfucking Jesus. I ain't no motherfucking God. And if it was, or any gods for that matter, and if it was, they doing a piss poor job of their job. If you're supposed to be the healer, the almighty healer, why the fuck we got hospitals? If you supposed to be the almighty healer, the why is it even once again handicap parking at church? You go to church and it's handicap parking. Where are the miracles? Why is it handicap parking at the church? Answer me that. Or it should be one-time parking. Shit, you come in this motherfucker with amputated leg. Shit, you come out that motherfucker with the reptilian leg or some shit. Like, you bust up out that motherfucker and just one-time parking for handicap. Like, and it switch every week. It's over here, it's in the front church this week, it's over there, it's different parking. But okay, this neither here nor there. If you find any of this content valuable, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel. Like always, love yourself, treat yourself, don't beat yourself. Holla.